Welcome back to the Whole Bible series. This week we are in the book of Proverbs. Mishle is part of the writings in the Tanakh. In our Bible, Proverbs is part of the Old Testament poetical books, which include wisdom literature. Survey of the Old Testament says this: a proverb illustrates a general principle, not a promise of God. This is an important point to keep in mind as we read the book. These are not promises from God, but rather a collection of quippy sayings from an ancient group of people. In the ancient Near East and in ancient Hebrew culture, proverbs were wise sayings passed down from older males to younger males. For more information, please go back to episode 21. Proverbs is the 20th book of the Bible. And while being assumed to be written by Solomon, there's actually evidence that Solomon did not write the entire book. So let's look what the Bible Knowledge Commentary says here. The authorship and date of Proverbs cannot be considered apart from understanding the book's structure. The book is comprised of 8 sections written at various times and including several authors or editors. So we see here in the layout, sections 1, 2, 3, and 5 are attributed to Solomon, but section 4 is attributed to the sayings of the wise, section 6 to Agur, section 7 to King Lemuel, and section 8 is not attributed to anyone. It's rather an unknown author. The book took its final form at least as late as Hezekiah's time because of what's written in chapter 25, verse 1. Whether his men compiled the entire book is uncertain. The final date of compilation is generally considered to be around 700 BC. Again, for more information, go back to episode 21. So what is the purpose of Proverbs? Survey of the Old Testament says the purpose of the book of Proverbs is to collect the wisdom of ancient Israel and offer both instruction and example in godly living. The prologue identifies the book's intended audience. True, the discourses of the first 9 chapters are addressed to a son, but the prologue is more inclusive and shows us that the final form of the book intends a broader audience for the whole. In the final analysis, the book of Proverbs is for everyone, but with one notable exception: the fool is excluded. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that fools exclude themselves. By definition, fools cannot participate in the wisdom because they reject God. The final verse of the prologue, verse 7 of chapter 1, gives what has been called the motto of the book: the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And that is taken from How to Read Proverbs. So let's look at some of the themes in Proverbs: the fear of the Lord, the retribution principle, which we talked about a few weeks ago, the proper human speech, proper human sexuality, and wisdom. There's a little note here on wisdom. Wisdom is not intelligence, pure and simple. It does not necessarily exclude intelligence, but that is not the focus. Proverbs itself attributes wisdom to a series of animals, not because they have great intelligence, but because they know how to navigate life well. Biblical wisdom is much closer to the idea of emotional intelligence than it is to the intelligence quotient. Wisdom is a skill, a knowing how. It is not raw intellect, a knowing that. Goldman's remarkable conclusion is that EQ, not IQ, correlates with success in life. Success being the ability to get a hold of a good job, enjoy life, and sustain healthy relationships. Again, that's from Daniel Trier in How to Read Proverbs. Another note here from the Lexham Bible Dictionary: although the nations around ancient Israel did not use the same descriptions or terms to refer to wisdom, the underlying concepts associated with wisdom throughout the ancient world were largely the same as those in Israel. There's a note here that I added. There's a book that's part of the Apocrypha that's called the Wisdom of Solomon. And I wanted to put this in here because, again, people assume that Proverbs is written by Solomon, and logically, they would assume that the Wisdom of Solomon is written by Solomon as well, but it's not. So let's take a look at what's written here from the Lexham Bible Dictionary. So, Wisdom of Solomon, also called the Book of Wisdom, is an apocryphal book not included in the Bibles of those in the Protestant tradition. However, it is a canonical book for the Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Ethiopian Orthodox, and Syriac tradition churches. While it is similar in style to Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes, it was originally written in Greek and displays characteristics of multiple authors. The Wisdom of Solomon was probably written by a Greek-speaking Jew in Alexandria in the time period of 300 BC to 508, or excuse me, to 50 AD. So this is at least 400 years after the compilation of the Book of Proverbs. Although Wisdom of Solomon's title points to King Solomon as the author, this is a pseudonymous inscription. His name was probably used as a literary device. Although the actual text of Wisdom of Solomon does not mention Solomon by name, instead his name is applied as an inscription to the work. It is evident that the figure of Solomon speaks, Wisdom of Solomon 1 through 9, particularly particularly as he describes his own search for wisdom and exhorts the rulers of the earth to likewise seek the wisdom of God so that they may rule well. Just a note here about what the Apocrypha is. Apocrypha, meaning hidden, is commonly used to describe a group of approximately 20 ancient works, most of which appear in Greek and Bible codices from the 4th and 5th centuries AD. Throughout history, the church has debated the inspiration, value, authority, and usefulness of these books. These texts remain largely unknown to most Protestants. And back to the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is broken into 4 sections. Again, here's the time frame from the reign of Solomon to approximately 700 BC when Hezekiah was the king, and this book was compiled into its final form. And let's go to the first section. So, chapter 1 gives us an introduction to Proverbs. Let's look at chapter 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. To know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and let one who understands obtain guidance. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So here in the first 7 verses kind of lays out the whole purpose of the book being written. And so this was probably part of what Solomon originally wrote and why he initially started putting these proverbs together. And there's a note here on the left. In these verses, the author introduced himself and his literary form, gave an extended statement of why proverbs were recorded, and stated a theological reason why his readers should become the kind of people he wanted them to be. Again, the motto of the book, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And the inverse of that, that fools despise wisdom and instruction. There's another interesting section in this first portion of the book, and that's chapters 8 and 9. And this basically takes the idea of wisdom and personifies it. It puts it into a person. You see a note here on the left from the Bible Knowledge Commentary. It says God's presence is manifest in the book of Proverbs in the personification of wisdom, since God is the source and giver of wisdom and the theological principle of the fear of the Lord rooted in Israel's covenant relationship with Yahweh. So I want to look at part of these two chapters where wisdom is actually speaking. So let's look at chapter 8, verse 12. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and I find knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil, pride and arrogance, and the way of evil, and perverted speech I hate. I have counsel and sound wisdom. I have insight. I have strength. By me kings reign, and rulers decree what is just. By me princes rule, and nobles, all who govern justly. So I'll pause there real quick. So we see that there's a connection there between someone who rules or reigns and them doing it justly. And wisdom is the tie between those two. So a king or a president that rules justly is, or should be, shows wisdom. Back to verse 17. I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold, and my yield than choice silver. I walk the way of righteousness in the paths of justice, granting an inheritance to those who love me and filling their treasuries. Excuse me. The Lord possessed me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up, at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth, when there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills I was brought forth, before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master workman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the children of man. So note here on the left from the Bible Knowledge Commentary, wisdom's many claims are credible because of her association with the Lord in creation. She existed before the world was created, and she participated with the Lord in creation, sharing his joy at its accomplishments. On to verse 32. And now, O sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not neglect it. Blessed is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who fails to find me injures himself. All who hate me love death. Just a note in the top box says, because of wisdom's unique role, she makes a final plea for people to acquire her. And then below that, chapter 9, we're going to get into here, summarizes chapters 1 through 836 by contrasting the invitation of wisdom and of folly. So we're going to contrast two different things together in just a moment. So let's look at chapter 9. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her beasts. She has mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her young women to call from the highest places in the town. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. To him that lacks sense, she says, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine that I have mixed. Leave your simple ways and live and walk in the way of insight. Then we have the nemesis of Lady Wisdom, the woman folly. Verse 13. The woman folly is loud. She is seductive and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. She takes a seat on the highest places of the town, calling to those who pass by. You who are going on their way, whoever is simple, let him turn in here. And and to him who lacks sense, she says, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. So let's look to the left first in the box. It says, wisdom is portrayed as a responsible woman of character and wealth preparing a banquet, while folly is portrayed as a harlot inviting young men to a sensual meal of stolen water and food eaten in secret. Let's look down at the comparison here on the bottom. So on the left, we have Lady Wisdom, and on the right, we have the woman folly. All right, so you can see verse 4 and verse 16 are identical. Okay, they're calling out to those who lack sense. And Lady Wisdom says, come eat of my bread. But woman folly says, take the bread that's eaten in secret. Again, Lady Wisdom says, drink of the wine that I have mixed. But woman folly says, come drink this stolen water because it's sweet. All right, so these are opposites of each other. And the personification of wisdom then clashes with that of woman folly. Let's look at verse 6. Leave your simple ways and live and walk in the way of insight. So they're both calling to those who lack sense. They're calling to the simple person. And Lady Wisdom says, leave your simple ways and you will get life. But woman of folly, she wants them to stay simple. She doesn't offer wisdom. Instead, she teaches them to remain in their ignorance. And because of that, they get death. Let's look at verse 18. But he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. All right. So you follow your ignorance, you stay senseless, and you get Sheol. Let's move on to the second portion. So here's the introduction to the wise sayings, chapter 22, verse 17. Incline your ear and hear the words of the wise, and apply your heart to my knowledge, for it will be pleasant if you keep them within you. If all of them are ready on your lips, that your trust may be in the Lord. I have made them known to you today, even to you. Have I not written for you 30 sayings of counsel and knowledge to make you know what is right and true, that you may give a true answer to those who sent you? All right, so here in the introduction, he's saying, hey, this is why I put this together to give you 30 wise sayings to keep you on the right path. Let's look at a couple of those sayings. Chapter 22, verse 24. Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare. Chapter 23, verse 13. Do not withhold discipline from a child. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. If you strike him with the rod, you will save his soul from Sheol. Chapter 24, verse 17. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and let not your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and be displeased and turn away his anger from him. All right, so again, let's look at these three sayings as they sit. Remember that these are proverbs, they're not promises from God. Okay, so a wise man is saying, don't hang out with angry people because you'll learn to be angry like them. In chapter 23, a wise man is saying not to stop disciplining your child because if you do not discipline your child, then they're going to end up in Sheol. All right. So disciplining, just like we talked about before, uh, wisdom equals life and ignorance equals death. Well, same thing here. If you don't teach your child, if you don't discipline and teach your child correctly, then they're going to end up in Sheol. And they're going to end up with death rather than learning wisdom. Chapter 24, don't rejoice when your enemy falls, right? Because God may come to that person and turn them back to uh, away from their ignorance. Uh, yeah, I think that's a good example of something that doesn't seem to line up with the promises of God. I think God wants every soul, every heart to turn towards Him. So why wouldn't God offer the enemy mercy? And so here we see that this is a proverb, a wise saying from a man rather than a promise from God. Look here on the left from the Bible Knowledge Commentary. It says the sayings in 22:17 through 24:34 were written by wise men other than Solomon and were compiled either in his lifetime or later. As stated in 22:20, the first portion includes 30 sayings. Let's get to the third section. This is more of Solomon. And we're going to look at chapter 25. So this is, we referenced earlier about King Hezekiah and the final compilation of the book. This is where they get that from. Let's look at verse 1 of chapter 25. These also are Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of Hezekiah, king of Judah, copied. It is the glory of God to conceal things, but the glory of kings is to search things out. As the heavens for height and the earth for depth, so the heart of kings is unsearchable. Take away the dross from the silver, and the smith has material for a vessel. Take away the wicked from the presence of the king, and his throne will be established in righteousness. Do not put yourself forward in the king's presence, or stand in the place of the great, for it is better to be told, come up here, than to be put lower because in the presence of a noble. And then let's skip to chapter 28, verse 5, and look at one of his Proverbs. Evil men do not understand justice, but those who seek the Lord understand it completely. Better is a poor man who walks in his integrity than a rich man who is crooked in his ways. Let's look at a note from the Bible Knowledge Commentary here about chapter 25. Hezekiah's men, perhaps royal scribes, copied, literally it says removed, from one book or scroll to another, more than 100 of Solomon's Proverbs. This was about 250 years after Solomon wrote them. Hezekiah's men grouped many of these proverbs in units of similar thought. And finally, we come to the last section. So chapter 30 is a proverb of Agur. All right, so we mentioned that earlier, but who is Agur? Well, the truth is we really don't know. So it says it's a proverb of Agur, son of Jakeh. The identity of Agur is unknown. He seems to have been humble and observant and inquisitive, says the Bible Knowledge Commentary. The Lexham Bible Dictionary says that Agur may mean gatherer. And because of that, some midrash, so this is teachings of the Jewish church from the early days in the first century and so on, first couple centuries, says that Proverbs takes this as an epithet for Solomon who gathered wisdom. So in other words, the midrash teaches that these are written by Solomon also. Let's look at chapter 31. Chapter 31 is a proverb of King Lemuel. Well, King Lemuel is not an Israelite king. He's not king of Israel or Judah. And so we don't know anything about him either. The Bible Knowledge Commentary says, nothing is known about Lemuel except that he was a king. The instruction in verses 2 through 9 was addressed to him by his mother. This is unusual, for elsewhere in Proverbs, a father was addressing his son or sons. though twice a mother's teaching is referred to by the father. Lexham Bible Dictionary says that it's impossible that this figure, or excuse me, it is possible that this figure was associated with Massa, which is a location in Arabia, though the reference to Lemuel may instead apply to Solomon. So again, there is some thinking that these are synonyms for Solomon, that he's using, I should say, pseudonym. He's using a pseudonym to write these proverbs, and that they're just compiled later. But most scholars think that these were written by two other people. And there's a note here on the left that both of these people are generally considered by scholars to come from outside of the Israelite community. So it's kind of odd that these are, I guess, thrown into the book of Proverbs. So the Israelite community, while these did not come from amongst themselves, they must have valued these two Proverbs highly. Lastly, to finish off the book, there's a section by an unknown author, and it details the perfect woman. So let's look at what it says in chapter 31, verse 10 and thereafter. An excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hand, she plants a vineyard. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And there's just a note here from the Bible Guide on the left. The book of Proverbs ends with a poem in praise of the perfect woman. It is as though the Lady Wisdom of the early chapters has got married and is now running a home. She is trustworthy, hardworking, and farsighted. She is good at business, clever with her hands, and generous to the needy. She looks good, speaks wisely, and teaches well. Her secret is that she fears the Lord, and the outcome is that her family is proud of her. So that's the end of Proverbs. And as we come away, I want to just talk about a few takeaways. So the bullet points here on the left kind of sum it up. The Proverbs lead people to seek God, to fear the Lord, to learn from Lady Wisdom, to seek righteousness, and to love justice. And we'll finish off with a quote from the Lexham Bible Dictionary. Proverbs makes numerous links between godly wisdom and righteousness. The adjective righteous occurs 66 times in Proverbs, and the nouns for the same word group, rightness and righteousness, occur an additional 27 times. Both a spiritual and an ethical component is tied up to righteousness. The essence of the righteous person can be defined in Proverbs. The righteous are willing to disadvantage themselves to advantage the community. The wicked are willing to disadvantage the community to advantage themselves. Righteousness is a pattern of life, not merely specific acts. Moreover, the concepts of righteousness and justice frequently occur together, as justice seeks to restore the right order that has been broken. The pursuit of wisdom is not an end in itself. It starts with a relationship with God and leads to a righteous life that seeks the blessing of the hearer's world. So that's it. If you guys have questions, I'd love to answer them. Please post down below. And I appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you. Have a great evening.